Earlier this month, Dragon Age the Veilguard shockingly released as a PlayStation Plus title a mere 5 months after the game's initial release, and well, I took this opportunity to play it. Is this an opportunity for more gamers to experience a diamond in the rough, or a desperate attempt to boost numbers before the end of the financial year? Let's take a look at how the Veilguard came to be, what it does well, and maybe not so well, before I reveal if you should play Dragon Age the Veilguard in 2025. It's not usually a good sign when a game takes a long time to release, or the game's main focus changes partway through. So as I was reading the Wikipedia page for the Veilguard, waiting for my game to download and preparing for this review and my playthrough, it was a little concerning to discover that the Veilguard has been affected by both. Starting in development in 2015 following Dragon Age the Inquisition, BioWare has not only spent 9 years developing this sequel, but halfway through development, after initially being cancelled, the success of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order shifted plans for the game away from being a live service game and refocused it to being a single player experience with influence from 2018's God of War. According to one developer, the Veilguard was envisaged as a hugely reactive game, smaller in scope than Dragon Age Inquisition, but much larger in player choice, followers, reactivity and depth. Okay, I'm liking the sound of this so far. Development paused and developers were reshuffled to help with other projects as BioWare faced challenges in developing Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem. Oh no. Due to the Dragon Age devs being bounced around between these projects, the Veilguard, at this time codenamed Joplin, was ultimately cancelled in October of 2017, with many veteran Dragon Age staff leaving BioWare in response. Development restarted in 2018, initially with live service elements based on Anthem's code, which was believed to be an attempt to recreate the success of games like FIFA and Battlefield. And it was later, following the success of Jedi Fallen Order and the failure of Anthem, that led to the service being shut down in 2021 that finally shifted development of the Veilguard back to focus on single player. The final few years of development were relatively stable, seeing changes in some of the higher-ups at BioWare and layoffs of 50 staff who were working on a mix of Veilguard and the next Mass Effect. The game initially released in October 2024, with development fully concluding in 2025, meaning no further updates or DLC are planned for the game from only 3 months following its release. So as you do, I started off creating a character. I'll be honest, I'm usually one of those people that just picks a pre-made character, makes a few changes to the hair and moves on. But as I still had to wait for the game to download, I spent about half an hour creating my character, giving some thought to her design and how it would influence and be influenced by my class, faction and backstory options. Meet Escher Ingelvar, aka Rook, Elf Mage, member of the Mornwatch, and general badass if I do say so myself. We're introduced to her well and truly in the deep end as she attempts to hunt down the location of Nev Gallus, local private investigator, in a bid to stop Solus, the game's big bad, from completing his ritual and destroying the Veil. As we make our way through the city, the ritual begins to weaken the Veil, opening the way for demons to run rampant. We fight off a few demons and cultists as the game introduces us to the different elements of combat. It feels a little slow to start with. The way you weave basic attacks and blocks as a mage is extremely reminiscent of Hogwarts Legacy in both visuals and flow, but with a great depth through the incorporation of various magical abilities. Later on in the tutorial, we'll be introduced to different weapon styles that can be freely switched between, this new dagger and orb style allowing for a quicker form of contact. After a few fights and many ruined homes looted, we meet up with Nev. It turns out she doesn't actually need our help after all, but luckily for us, she's tracked down the location of the elven god Solus. So she joins our party as we make our way into his hideout to put an end to his ritual. And so begins the descent through Solus's hideout, tucked away in ancient caverns hidden below a giant statue at the heart of the city of Minrathous. As we descend, opportunities to investigate our surroundings clue us in further to Solus's motives and reasoning, presenting the idea that many of his beliefs and motives aren't actually that bad, apart from the whole wanting to destroy the world thing. We find an alluvion, an ancient elven portal, and step through into a forest, the location of Solus's ritual. We fight off a bunch more demons, but surprise surprise, our attempt to foil the ritual goes wrong, and we end up making things worse. Now, trapped in another realm known as the Fade, it's threatened that our disruption of Sodus' ritual may just have unleashed ancient, evil, elven gods into the world. This whole segment serves not only as a tutorial, but also the setup for the plot going forward. It's well crafted, well paced tutorial introducing gameplay, the story, and the world piece by piece. There's action, there's drama, and there's atmosphere that the whole thing drips with. After playing through the tutorial, I'm really looking forward to returning to Mindrathous when it's not in the midst of a late night demon invasion, though I wouldn't mind if it were. The city as we explore it here is dark and broody, a fantasy fascist dystopia scored by a soundtrack that matches the intensity of the high stakes. So far then, so impressed. So many games neglect to ensure their tutorial is a good experience, but Dragon Age: The Veilguard hasn't. It introduced new systems one at a time in ways that make sense of the story and naturally expands the gameplay. It's introduced the story in a way that immediately set the stakes and built them higher, giving just enough to get me invested before shit hits the fan and I'm left to have a greater influence on how my character will interact with the world and build relations. So at this stage I'm excited to see what, if anything, my choices will do to influence the story and where my interactions will take my relationships with various characters. There's a lot more game to go, and this is neither a let's play nor a lore video, so let's now focus on what the game does and doesn't do well. Since we're on the topic, let's start with the remainder of the story. The story itself is split into 3 distinct quest types. Main quests, which revolve around you attempting to defeat the elven gods you released in your botched attempt to stop Sodus' ritual, side quests and companion quests. The main story feels pretty standard for this kind of RPG, with your mission for the most part being to gather allies and strengthen them up for the final battle. Along the way you'll have victories and things will go wrong, but it's nothing particularly new or special. It all comes to a satisfying conclusion even if the journey is a standard and predictable affair. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, as it's done well and I nevertheless enjoyed the story the whole way through. Despite the gameplay for the most part of the 60 hours I spent with the Veilguard, the culmination of the gameplay struggles to match the ending's quality story-wise, which, for me, created a separation between the emotional, fast-paced, bombastic narrative and the gameplay that, by the end of the game, was starting to grow stale and culminated in a disappointingly dull final boss fight. Side quests then, as you might expect, are minor storylines that tend to revolve around helping a local population and their area's faction to boost their strength. There's not a huge amount to say about these. They range from the basic and simple errand quests to mini-bosses to quests that can have a significant impact on their ending should you choose to complete them. It's all pretty fairly standard RPG stuff. My biggest complaint here is that there's probably too much side content. I really enjoyed a lot of the side stuff and I spent the majority of the campaign completing every bit of side content presented to me. But as I grew closer and closer to the end of the game, it started to feel as though it would never end, dragging the pace of the game significantly, to the point that I actually found myself passing over many of the non-companion side missions by the final stages of the game. So lastly then, we have the companion quests. While I'm always a sucker for completing every side quest I can, companion quests were the quest lines that really stood out to me more than any other. Your companions will each have a quest chain that will resolve their individual storyline. These optional quests are great opportunities to flesh out your relationship with each companion, giving you the opportunity to level them up, or have a bit of one-on-one time if you do want to pursue romantic options with them. These can also unlock new areas of the map by giving you extra options for interacting with the world, allowing you to call on that character's ability to remove obstacles and progress puzzles even when they're not in your party. And these were easily some of my favourite quests in the game. I always find that it's the smaller character-driven quest lines in games like this that have the greatest impact, whether a simple meeting over coffee to discuss plans, attending to magical artifacts locked away in a vault, or developing new burgeoning abilities. I found these quests always have something interesting to offer. So what about the rest of the game then? Well, the combat isn't too bad. It's fairly basic, action-oriented system with your usual dodges, blocks, melee and ranged attacks with abilities for you and your companions that will often have some kind of synergy. Some abilities will add primer effects to enemies, while another ability, usually on another character, detonating that effect for big damage. You can only have 4 abilities equipped at any one time, but you'll have plenty of abilities to swap out and be flexible to adapt to your skills as you need to. Each enemy you face will also have resistances and weaknesses that will cause you to do more or less damage, encouraging you to either boost up one damage type and have a party that helps cover the other, or have a range of abilities that can cover a range of weaknesses. I at one point found a legendary weapon that greatly boosted lightning damage, and though I didn't have many active abilities to complement it without entirely shifting my build, which you are free to do, I was enjoying using lightning as my one-handed weapon, so it was a great boost to those and made them very fun to use in almost all situations. So though the combat in the Veilguard is simple, I did find it somewhat enjoyable. It's certainly bolstered by the freedom the game allows you in fine-tuning the difficulty, giving free rein to alter dodge and block timings, resistances, weaknesses, enemy health, damage, and much more. It does come with some downsides though. On the default settings, enemies still hit fairly hard, pushing you to make liberal use of the dodge and block mechanic. But this equally means that some larger fights might find you spending the majority of the time doing just that. Personally, I found it to be a little frustrating at times, as it really dropped the flow of combat to just be endlessly dodging or blocking. I also found, particularly in those busy moments, that it could be a little difficult to even see exactly what was happening on the screen, and most importantly, difficult to see the icon to indicate the opportune moments to block and dodge. Overall then, I would have liked to have encountered more combat. Whenever you load into an area, you will come across groups of enemies as you explore. Once these enemies have been defeated though, they won't respawn until you've left the area and loaded back in. This for me was a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it made exploration for collecting chests and other collectibles throughout the map much easier, but it also made the world feel empty when you're not doing those quests and you're not doing your initial explore. And that's something you're going to find yourself doing quite a lot, because exploring the world is one of the main ways you'll find yourself gearing up both you, your character, and your companions. Shrines found in the world might reward you with skill points or additional health, while chests will provide new gear items or valuable items that can be sold to vendors. Any gear you find can be upgraded. Finding or buying duplicates of the same item will increase its rarity from common through to legendary, while the item that can then be upgraded further to improve its stats or enchanted to provide extra bonuses. It's a good system, encouraging you to interact with the shops of the world in order to increase your gear strength or find new items out in the world. Selling valuable items to faction vendors will increase that faction's power. Faction shops can be upgraded to unlock higher tiers of items, upgrades, and new items. Boosting factions up by completing faction quests and selling valuable items to their shops will, in theory, put them in a better position to help during the endgame and give you a better ending. But those kind of situations where your actions have a major effect on the story are few and far between. So, unless you have an ending in mind that you're aiming for on a playthrough, it's hard to gauge exactly the impact your actions are having, for better or for worse, on how the narrative is developed. That is a flaw of this kind of choice system though. Big decisions would realistically cause big divergences in the narrative, so the effects of your choices and the actions you take are limited to smaller moments that inform which of a set of predetermined endings you will get. It's a system that benefits from a larger variety of endings, and completely understandable why BioWare would not opt to expand choices and endings out for such a large campaign. But it does mean that the few choices you do have along the way don't really feel like they're making that much of a difference. Something Dragon Age the Veilguard did do exceptionally well though was both its graphics and its performance. Veilguard looks great, offering a variety of different locations, all visually distinctive and at times breathtaking. From the forests of Arlathan to the necropolises of Navarra, Veilguard offers stunning location after stunning location. The game also offers the standard performance or fidelity modes, and I'll be honest, on the PS5 I barely spotted a difference, with the biggest one being that I could see the performance mode seems to remove some of the lighting effects. I flicked back and forth between the two modes, but I really couldn't tell any difference and ended settling up on fidelity mode. Veilguard at this stage then is well optimized, stable, and seemingly bug free. I don't believe I really encountered any notable drop in frame rates or any other performance issues for the vast majority of my playthrough. Though it has to be said, I did experience a very small number of crashing and freezing in the last few hours of the playthrough, literally 1 or 2 instances across my entire 60-hour playthrough. The companions are such a big part of the game that it felt only right that they get their own little section. As you progress through the main story, you will come across several individuals who will act as your companions for gameplay. These are usually representatives of each of the factions that you will assist, and will assist you in your fight against the elven gods. Though you'll unlock several companions on your journey, you'll only be able to have 2 alongside you at any time. Prior to each mission, you'll be given the option to select who to take along, and you can visit fast travel points to freely swap out when in exploration maps. The central system of the companions is your relationship with them. Companions are a huge part of the Veilguard, so it's no surprise that they get a lot of focus. Companions gain XP and level up through your interactions with them, dialogue choices will gain their approval or disapproval, and your relationship with them will level them up, providing you with skill points to fill out their skill tree. I ended up having somewhat mixed feelings on the role of the companions in Veilguard. On one hand, the companions are all pretty great, their stories and characteristics all pretty varied and unique, and I found them to all be enjoyable to interact with throughout the game. Yet the system has many cracks and issues that stem from your relationships being so heavily tied to their progression. For me, the most glaring issue being that everyone is just so nice. I mean, it's a strange issue to have, right? But it just comes down to your relationship with characters being tied to progression. Players need to be given the freedom to forge relationships with the characters they want to use frequently to get the skill points needed to enhance that companion. But you can't predict who people will want to be with, so you make it easy to befriend everyone. Souring a relationship with a character based on your choices, maybe even locking yourself out of skills later down the line, doesn't feel great either, so you make it so that the vast majority of influence a player has on a relationship is a positive one, and well, that's just boring, isn't it? You can't really then fail a conversation or damage a relationship. Every dialogue choice is the same choice, but with a different personality. Do you want to say it in a friendly, sarcastic, or aggressive manner? Do you want to say it with a bit more compassion or with some additional knowledge from your background? The one time your choice did have an impact, choosing which of 2 companions' home city you would save from a dragon attack, a big deal was made about the choice and the impact it had on that companion. But ultimately, it felt rather minor. The impact of your choice on your relationship with that character was resolved almost immediately, and the aftermath of the attack itself was mostly just a fairly minor visual change and slight changes to how that character would play. Ultimately, I found the whole system to be a little boring, neutered by its ties to the progression of companions. I had hoped for there to be some lasting impact from my choices, maybe impacting relationships within the group as we face a seemingly impossible fight. But the few choices that actually had any real impact on the narrative are reserved for the game's finale, but these choices felt arbitrary as opposed to being the culmination of previous choices made throughout the narrative. Though I found the system itself to be lacking, the game is generally well written with interesting characters. I honestly did find a connection with all of the companions and enjoyed following up on all available dialogue for each of them, when conversations were made available. You'll frequently be provided opportunities to have set conversations with your companions at various stages of the narrative, but there are shockingly few interactions to be had outside of these moments, and I really would have liked to have more opportunities to just freely interact with characters. Dragon Age: The Veilguard is pretty good, despite it having a couple of issues that in the grand scheme of things may be relatively minor, but still had a noticeable impact, with a simple and repetitive gameplay and companion system that could use some refinement being the Veilguard's biggest offenders. Despite these minor issues, the strong narrative, widely adaptive difficulty, beautiful world design and interesting characters stuck their hooks deeply and left me feeling with a satisfied experience. The Veilguard may have had some negativity surrounding it at launch, but BioWare have delivered a strong game. I've ultimately gone with an 8 for the Veilguard's final verdict. It's not perfect, but it's a damn good game, and I would absolutely recommend it. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to Food Thought Gaming for more reviews. Thank you for watching, and happy gaming.